things are definitely heating up, and that's exactly why I'm making this video, because when it comes to XRP, the markets, and global politics, every day is a roller coaster. Let's dive into what's been unfolding, starting with the European Union. They've stated that they want the current US tariffs to remain in place since negotiations appear to be going nowhere. While Trump continues to claim progress is being made on trade talks, the EU is essentially accusing him of using tariffs as a pretext, suggesting that he never truly intended to strike a deal in the first place. That's a bold statement, especially considering Trump's insistence that things are going well. It raises serious concerns about where inflation might be headed. Trump clearly doesn't want it to spike in the short term, but if these deadlocks continue, they could have a major economic impact. We've already seen some fallout, with the SP 500 slipping since the EU's comments, dipping from near 5,500 down to around 5,400. This kind of movement shows how sensitive the markets are to geopolitical tensions. And XRP, which was hovering close to $2.20, also felt the effect, so it didn't crash dramatically, but there was still a noticeable decline, a few percentage points, which is enough to cause concern among investors. Another indicator of economic stress is the growing inventory of single-family homes for sale, even in a market that's been considered relatively strong. I often look at this metric as a predictor of future economic conditions, and what it's showing now isn't pretty. Listings are rising sharply while actual sales remain flat or are slowing down, which is a classic warning sign of a housing market downturn. In fact, there are now over 500,000 new single-family homes available, the highest level since November 2007, which many of us remember as the beginning of the housing crash. Back then, similar data signaled deep trouble, and soon after, banks began to collapse. That same kind of financial pressure is building again, and if things continue this way, we could be looking at more stimulus packages, quantitative easing, or even bailouts. Defaults are climbing, and many homeowners are trying to sell because they simply can't afford their mortgages anymore. Compare that to 2004, when there were only about 142,000 new homes for sale. The housing market was solid then. Now, we've surpassed the 2006 bubble year in some regions, particularly in the South, where numbers are creeping close to all-time highs. It's not hard to believe that home prices may soon fall, which ironically could be a great buying opportunity, but only after the dust settles. Meanwhile, the Fed seems out of sync, reacting with data that's often 3 months old, which is way too slow in today's fast-paced global economy. Adding to all this turmoil is China, whose rhetoric toward the US is becoming increasingly aggressive. Recently, they accused the US of lacking any sense of shame, and they're confident that the tariff war will eventually backfire on America. Their message is clear: they believe the US depends on China far more than China needs the US, and if American consumers stop buying Chinese goods, they'll simply have to deal with higher prices that many already can't afford. Xi Jinping has been echoing this sentiment repeatedly, implying that while China may feel some pain, the US is in for a much rougher ride, with rising prices and economic slowdown looming. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what Trump's strategy is for inflation. He's surprised me before. After the initial tariffs, inflation actually went down, which no one really expected. It's possible he has something up his sleeve again, maybe an executive order or backroom deals with big corporations to keep prices stable for consumers. But unless something shifts dramatically, inflation feels inevitable. If you've got thoughts on this or any theories of your own, I'd love to hear them. Drop a comment below, because I genuinely want to know what you think. All in all, it's clear that the US economy is under real pressure, and we're seeing signs from all directions, from housing to global politics, so that we could be heading toward a serious correction unless something big changes. I think it's great that manufacturing is making its way back to the United States, and while the short-term economic pain hasn't fully made its way beyond the stock market, it's clear that significant shifts are coming. That's why I'm really interested in understanding when we'll start to see noticeable changes in prices. Of course, there's always the question of whether people are willing to pay more for products if it means not having to rely on trade with China, and that trade-off is becoming more relevant as policies evolve. Recently, there's been talk from the Trump administration about using tariff revenue, essentially money collected from foreign imports, as a means to purchase cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. This idea is gaining traction, especially as some propose moving away from traditional sources of revenue like income tax and instead leaning into external streams of funding through trade. One intriguing idea that's been floating around Capitol Hill involves revaluing the gold certificates currently held by the Treasury. These certificates are still officially priced at around $43 an ounce, even though the current market value of gold is over $3,000 an ounce. By updating their value, the government could theoretically unlock a large amount of capital, which some suggest could be used to buy Bitcoin and strengthen U.S. reserves in a more modern, digital form. Senator Cynthia Lummis's proposed Bitcoin Act of 2025 plays into this concept and has seen quite a bit of public interest. The broader vision here involves exploring all available financial tools, whether through tariffs, digital assets, or other creative economic mechanisms, and bringing in expertise from interagency working groups to develop fresh strategies. What's especially fascinating is the shift in economic philosophy from internal taxation to external revenue generation, combined with a move toward a high-tech, self-sustaining economy powered by artificial intelligence. By heavily investing in AI and automation, the U.S. could potentially eliminate the need for outsourcing manufacturing jobs, instead producing domestically with high efficiency and creating new, high-quality jobs in the tech and engineering sectors. It may feel like we're pulling the bandage off a bit too quickly, but this could be the future we're heading toward, a world where countries no longer rely on one another as much because advanced technology and domestic production make global dependence less necessary.